You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 28th of August 2013. RotherHam Council Deputy Leader resigns as 4 child sex grooming victims solicitors announce suit. GBH charged for Tyre firm boss who tackled Burglar. Violent repeat offender can't be deported because it would violate his human rights. Leftists assault German anti-Euro party leader. No more Christmas, Berlin tries neutrality. Frightening 73% of Spanish under 30s live with their parents. US tax dollars help fund UN hate camp in Gaza documentary. It is not about oil. Saudis offer Russia secret oil deal if it drops Syria. Thought for the day, dangerous truths or are they? And finally, you gotta pick a pussy or two, boy. Gotta pick a pussy or two. UK news. RotherHam Council Deputy Leader resigns as 4 child sex grooming victims solicitors announce suit. The Telegraph is reporting 4 victims of the convicted Rotherham child sex groomers are planning to sue Rotherham Council for systemic failures to protect them from sexual abuse by predatory men when they were children. Solicitors, Switzalskis, said that they are working on behalf of the women who want to take legal action against Rotherham Council. David Greenwood of Switzalskis said it's important to remember that at the time of the abuse they were children under the age of 16 and could not legally consent. The spotlight fell on Rotherham in 2010 when 5 men described by the judge as sexual predators were given lengthy jail terms after they were found guilty of grooming teenage girls for sex. This announcement coincides with BBC and Times newspaper reports that Deputy Leader of Rotherham Council, Jahangir Akhtar, has stepped down over claims he knew about a relationship between a girl in care and a suspected child abuser. It is reported Mr Akhtar is related to the alleged offender and was aware of their relationship. His decision to resign follows the publication of one woman's account of being allowed contact with the alleged abuser from 1999 when aged 14. Mr Akhtar said he was resigning out of courtesy. He denies the claims. World at 8 says, of course, if the Muslim ethnic population is as small as we're told, he knew about this abuse. It is within their communities and probably their own families, which is why it has remained unreported for so long. 30 years is a long time to create a climate of sexual grooming and abuse. Grievous bodily harm charge for Tyre firm boss who tackled Burglar. Businessman Andrew Woodhouse, 43, who confronted a burglar raiding his premises, appeared in court yesterday accused of attacking him. He was chasing thieves off his property when he claims one of them came at him with a wooden stick. It appears Woodhouse relieved the criminal of the stick and then allegedly used the stick to injure the man's legs before holding him down while his wife called the police. But when the officers arrived, they arrested Woodhouse and held him in a cell for 18 hours. He appeared at Newport Crown Court Friday 23rd of August, charged with grievous bodily harm with intent, which has a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Mr Woodhouse employs 6 staff, including 2 of his sons at the family business, which was set up 20 years ago. His firm have lost £15,000 in recent years to thefts of diesel and tools. 2 fuel thieves who stole £50 of diesel from Woodhouse's premises on the night of the alleged assault have been dealt with in court. Timothy Cross, 31, and Kevin Green, 52, took 2 jerry cans of diesel from Woodhouse's Tyre depot in Abergavenny. Cross and Green both admitted theft and were fined £75 by the Quimbran magistrates. World at 8 states, it's all beyond belief that the thieves get the consideration and the victim gets the arrest. This simply would not happen in a country overrun with diversity and human rights. Violent repeat offender can't be deported because it would violate his human rights. A foreign criminal jailed for a series of violent attacks cannot be deported because it would violate his human rights, it's been ruled. Sanel Sabaz, a Bosnian who now lives in Hertford, came to Britain as a child in 1993. Since 2005 he has committed a string of offences including common assault, handling stolen goods, theft, public order offences and assaulting the police. But he has now been told he can stay indefinitely after he brought a legal challenge under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which protects the right to private and family life. His lawyers argued that if he was sent back to Bosnia it would separate him from his parents' brother and cousin, who are also in Britain, which would breach his rights. Last night critics said that the ruling by a judge in the Immigration and Asylum Chamber reinforced the need for urgent reform of immigration laws. World at 8 says, of course we're all soft on the Muslim Bosnians now due to all the misinformation over the Bosnian war, so this guy and his family will get away with murder. In fact, I am against families being separated, so send them all back to Bosnia, as it's now virtually open season on Christians out there. European news. Leftists assault German anti-Euro party leader. Bernd Lucke, the leader of the German anti-Euro party, was assaulted and knocked to the ground by far-left activists during a rally in Bremen, according to his Alternative for Germany AfD party. The police reported having arrested 3 of the 25 hooded youngsters who carried out the assault after having stabbed a campaign worker and attacked 16 supporters of the anti-Euro party with pepper spray. It's an intolerable assault on the democratic process that violent activists disturb peaceful AfD election events, which has echoes of the Weimar Republic, the AfD leader wrote in a statement. World at 8 states, ever since Marx reared his ugly head, nationalists and patriots have been under threat. No more Christmas. Berlin tries neutrality. Will Berlin cancel Christmas this year? Germany's multicultural capital is experimenting with religious neutrality to make all its residents feel more at home. Deutsche Welle Louise Osborne is all for it. It may be too early to start talking about Christmas in August unless you work in the chocolate industry, but as summer slowly eases into fall, it is already cropping up in casual conversation as plans are being made. That's not because people are particularly looking forward to the festive season. Personally, I'm hoping to stave off winter as long as possible with an Indian summer. But it is nevertheless now occupying the thought of Kreuzberg-Friedrichstein's district officials due to a row over religious terms such as Christmas, when referring to the annual winter markets that are legendary well beyond Germany's borders. It seems that some in Berlin's more alternative district have chosen to refer to the Weihnachtsmarkt, Christmas markets, taking place in the neighbourhood under the more neutral and non-religious term of Winterfest, Winter Festival. World at 8 states. And I thought that Christmas in Germany was a real celebration, like in the US. Apparently not. Frightening 73% of Spanish under 30s live with their parents. Prolonged recession and record unemployment rates are forcing 72.9% of Spaniards aged under 30 to live with their parents, according to a new study by the Youth Council of Spain, CJE. With 55% youth unemployment against an overall jobless rate of 26%, 8 out of 10 people aged under 30 are financially unable to fly the nest, according to the study released by CJE's Observatory on Emancipation. Those who do have jobs are often paid so little they can't afford to buy or rent starter homes, the study showed. Based on current average salaries and real estate prices, a 30 to 40-year-old in Spain can only realistically afford an average rental in the provinces of Extremadura and Castilla-La Mancha. This in spite of an estimated 800,000 empty residential units left behind by a speculative real estate bubble. What this adds up to, says Lopez and Suarez, is that young people are being almost systematically expelled from the real estate market. World at 8 comments, I wonder if in Spain their immigrants rate higher in the housing market than these youngsters, which is the case in the UK. We don't look after our own, just strangers. World news. US tax dollars help fund UN hate camp in Gaza. A camp instructor at a UN-affiliated youth camp in Gaza tells kids it's their duty to take back Israel. Palestinian children as young as 5 are being taught to hate Jews, glorify martyrs and support jihad. And a US-funded United Nations agency is helping to underwrite the effort, according to a controversial new documentary. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency hosts the summer camps in which Palestinian children are allegedly being indoctrinated in scenes captured in Camp Jihad inside UNRWA Summer Camp Season 2013. In addition to learning hateful phrases, the children are being taught that Israel belongs to them by birthright, according to the film by the Centre for Near East Policy Research. The mantra is, they are a gang of infidels and Christians, they don't like Allah and do not worship Allah, and they hate us. It is not about oil. Saudis offer Russia secret oil deal if it drops Syria. The Telegraph reports leaked transcripts of a meeting between Russia's Vladimir Putin and Saudi Prince Bandar bin Sultan, revealing that Saudi Arabia has secretly offered Russia a sweeping deal to control the global oil market and safeguard Russia's gas contracts if the Kremlin backs away from supporting the Assad regime in Syria. The revelations come amidst high tension in the Middle East, with the US, British and French warships poised for missile strikes in Syria. Iran has threatened to retaliate. Prince Bandar, head of Saudi intelligence, allegedly confronted the Kremlin with a mixture of inducements and threats in a bid to break the deadlock over Syria. The talks appear to offer an alliance between the OPEC cartel and Russia, which together produce over 40 million barrels a day of oil, 45% of global output. Such a move would alter the strategic landscape. As Safir said that Prince Bandar pledged to safeguard Russia's naval base in Syria if the Assad regime is toppled, but he also hinted at Chechen terrorist attack on Russia's Winter Olympics in Sochi if there is no accord. I can give you a guarantee to protect the Winter Olympics next year. The Chechen groups that threaten the security of the Games are controlled by us, he allegedly said. World at 8 says, if the West doesn't listen to this and other reports, we have only ourselves to blame for this blatant global corruption and the result. Thought for the day, dangerous truths, or are they? I know I've been banging on about misinformation and media lies for some years, but nowhere is this more apparent now with President Assad fighting the good fight for his country, Syria. It would appear that a person only has to disagree with a handful of democratic protesters in their country, which is a misnomer at the start, because democratic people surely don't protest armed in the streets, but leave it to more lawful forms of democracy. Then the entire world and its mother decide that the so-called democratic elements are right and that an elected head of state who has been incumbent for many years is automatically wrong. And if all else fails, like foreign aid and fighters, then this person must be seen to be wicked, and if this is put down to stacks of repeated pictures and so-called evidence which could be from anywhere, and very little is said from the established government, then of course it must be true. When will the West learn that the only tapes and evidence to come out of what is a country at civil war will be the ones the democratic rebels want to come out? I say democratic rebels when in fact, in the few unfortunate examples we have from past years, these protesters are in fact radical Islamic terrorists and nothing more and nothing less. They are not free or coalition forces. They are anti-whatever government forces or rule there is established in those countries, and they stand for radical Islamification of already fairly democratic Islamic governments. Fact: Iraq, Libya, Egypt have all and are still suffering under this new democratic guise, to the detriment of those countries and usually the deaths of the deposed elected leaders. One cannot count Egypt as Morsi was elected, even though I deeply suspect it was rigged, and obviously the Muslim Brotherhood didn't prove particularly popular with the majority of the people, thus the army coup. But Syria is the last ecumenical Muslim country in that area, having several Christians in the government, which is what the jihadists want to change for the worse, and which we in the West and the US are helping them to do. Now, we all remember Iraq. And even I was under the impression that Saddam had WMDs, and also Saddam was not a liked figure as he had invaded another Muslim country which incurred the wrath of the Saudi-reliant nations some years before. So, much like Hitler after World War II, Saddam was not publicity friendly, and also the West needed alternative news to avoid the financial bubble that exploded afterwards with subprime mortgages and more. Remember, all news in the media in both the US and the UK is certified by the governments and the establishments before it goes out. And if it avoids honesty in all its various forms, so much the better. After all, it was a good news day that took the 7/7 bombings off the pages, or was it the democratic Islamic terrorists who don't exist in this country doing their worst? We will never know, but remember the old adage, you can't believe everything you read in the papers, is never truer than nowadays, which is why you will see Farage and UKIP all over the news, but not the sensible comments of the British National Party or other nationalistic groups. The peoples or sheeples must never know the truth until what the powers that be intend to happen, happens, and for many years afterwards various committees are set up and paid for by you, the taxpayer, to ascertain where the truth went. Too little, too late, and deliberately so. Now, Iraq set the stage for global interference in other countries not previously done publicly since Germany invaded Poland, and look where that ended up. Millions of deaths, and I'm not just talking about the Holocaust in Europe here, and what have we achieved? The extermination of nationalism and patriotism, the resurgence of communism in another form and a more dangerous form, yet another genocide of the cream of younger generations, and Germany and Japan are just as powerful as ever, and in fact Japan is just as nationalistic as it was before the war. This doesn't mean I'm anti-war necessarily. The road to peace is filled with graves of soldiers and civilians, and in truth there is a war on this planet all the time, it's just we're not informed of it. I am anti the misinformation leading to wars and the excuses used by various governments to cross the red line to openly interfere in another nation's problems. And I use the word interfere, not solve, not help, but frankly make yet another photo-fit fuck-up of yet another country for years to come, and usually very expensive ones, both in the cost of rebuilding these countries or the cost to us in the UK of the inevitable spike in immigration from those places. Now, the one whine that Muslims have all over the world, which apparently justifies them bombing the bollocks off anyone in the West, is that we kill Muslims in their own countries. And to some extent this is true, but only to a very small extent, and I will elaborate on that point. It is a case of if the shoe fits, and the first thing to acknowledge is that if these countries did not have oil and other valuable resources, even down to opium and other drugs, the UN, the US and the UK wouldn't touch them with a barge pole with a French letter at the end. More Muslims kill their own in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Egypt and now Syria than British or US troops have done. Fact, get over it. Another point is positive hype. You send troops in to win hearts and minds, and in fact this is what the poor buggers are told. See a terrorist or freedom fighter and walk on. In fact, walk right on over the IED that he's planted in the road. It's all troop training, and now the world is getting smaller, there are very few places that troops can be trained in warfare in the field. And it keeps our soldiers out of our country in case of civil unrest, at which time our government would call in the EU army and then God help us all. If Syria is invaded or the president brought to heel with airstrikes, the picture will become an awful self-fulfilling prophecy. Just look at Libya or Iraq. The whole structure of those countries has gone, buildings, facilities and strong government. It's all down to small Islamic factions all battling it out within the ruination that is now their country. And you can't blame them completely. What started with Iraq should have been a lesson to the protesters and rebels. Don't send stage pictures and films to the TV channels because your problem will become a world problem and it will not be solved the way you might think once the big boys have had a go. Afghanistan is a ruin, and as soon as the Western troops go it will revert to fundamental Islam, and with the money that Pakistan has acquired through fear from the West of the so-called terrorist problem it is fighting, they will join together to form a large Islamic state. And remember that Pakistan, along with India, has enough money to fund an atomic strike, and I personally wouldn't give either of these nations a toy gun to play with, let alone a nuclear arsenal. These two divided religious countries could outplay the Middle East, and remember that parts of India are joined to Tibet and through to China, not a happy thought. Now William Hague, who suddenly found a lot to say over Syria, is a perplexing person. Frankly, I don't believe he was born in the normal manner. I think he was formed in a petri dish and delivered in his embryonic state direct to government. My nickname for him is Mr. Fetus. Perhaps the Syrian debacle is a remedy for his hitherto former supposed demise, or whatever, but if I don't stop seeing his visage on the TV, I'll shoot the man myself. Does he really think that even the sheeples or the people covered in ennui in this country believe the words that come out of his mouth? As for Obama, well, he has done pretty well in the very new part he plays for a half-caste son of a Kenyan to be elected to the highest place in America because they couldn't find a decent man of colour born in America of slave stock that could satisfy the black vote, so they imported one. But his political and religious leanings are dubious, and if in doubt watch various clips of his wife, who is full black and US born from slave stock and has every chip on her shoulder imaginable. She dislikes the US and white Americans, and it would seem doesn't share her hubby's Islamic views, or maybe she does. Obama does seem very keen to invade or help the Syrian people to overthrow Assad, perhaps because Assad is not anti-Christian or anti-white. It was Obama who formed the Red Line Brigade, to which the UN and the UK are familiarising themselves now, Assad having apparently crossed the Rubicon. Now neither they, you or I, know who carried out these so-called chemical attacks, but remains of sarin gas have been found in the so-called rebel strongholds, and I would think that if the President's men had organised it, they would have enough brainpower and capabilities between them not to muck it up. It, if it was sarin, was diluted, and there seems to have been a good many survivors who have been pictured and repictured to perpetuity, and boredom levels not previously reached with Saddam's killing of the Kurds, to realise that although the numbers apparently killed have reduced somewhat from the thousands to hundreds, it still rankles that they are mainly children and babies, which points to either deliberate rebel tactics or a ghastly mistake, the blame which they will directly lay at the door of President Assad. There is more than one way to skin a cat, and like Pearl Harbor, one can always find an excuse to go to war. I hope this doesn't happen, mainly because I have a lot of respect for the President Assad. At least he is Syrian, unlike Obama, who is not a true American despite all the blather about everyone being sons of immigrants claptrap. Assad knows his country, and it would be an angel who could rule any Muslim state, or indeed any state, without secret police, prisons and a firm hand. We all know what happens in countries who ignore this fact of life and try to install democracy and fairness to the people. It simply doesn't work. Revolutions ostensibly for the good of the people don't work. Bad revolutions, and where the interests of fundamentalist religious views lay, do not work. Just see Baghdad now and Lebanon now compared to what they were. Other countries you can see this are Lahore in Pakistan and Cairo in Egypt, also Tripoli in Libya. All these cities were lovely at one time, but now the full force of Islamic virtues and Sharia have been perpetrated on them, and the result? Chaos, ruination, death, destruction and divided cities. So in one way Muslims are right in saying that Western interference is wrong, but they are not saying it for the right reasons. Islamic terrorists want us to interfere. It will destroy the forces they need us to destroy and give them open season on the Western world. It will also give the wrong people the upper hand in those countries whose leaders tried to keep them in prison or at bay. It will also open up the floodgates for the pro-immigration lobby for thousands more Muslims to come to the West, as their countries have been made uninhabitable for the most part by their own stupidity and our ignorance. I echo Russia's warnings on Syria. Leave alone. It isn't the first time the West will be taken in and made use of, and when it boils down, who actually cares about these deaths? It sounds tough, but if Muslims can allow fellow Muslims to kill their own young for an ideological reason, why should we care? Why should the world care? The world has enough problems of its own. We don't need to share. Beware and keep out should be the media message. And finally, you gotta pick a pussy or two, boys, you gotta pick a pussy or two. Minnesota's Internet Cat Video Festival returns for 2013. Reaffirming America's continued presence in the cultural apex, the second annual Internet Cat Video Festival gets underway in Minnesota tomorrow. Once enjoyed on the privacy of a home computer or during a work break, the humble viral cat video has been elevated to a public art form. Festivals have sprung up in the US celebrating the genre, and this week sees the best feline stars honoured at Minnesota's State Fair, which is taking place between August the 28th and September the 1st. While light-hearted in tone, this 5-day cat extravaganza is at the forefront of a movement that harnesses the energy of humans' fascination with technology and pets, and celebrates their power to unite all peoples in appreciation of their antics. Along with the mirth provided, cat videos can be big business too. The animated short film called Niam Cat has been watched over 1 million times since it was posted on YouTube in 2011. It was created by illustrator Chris Torres, who recently took Warner Brothers to court over their alleged unlicensed use of the meme. This presenter says in the midst of wars and the oddness of human nature, it's relaxing to watch some of these videos, especially if you're a cat persona as I am. Some are really funny and some others with very small kittens are just gorgeous. To me, a never-ending source of hope and humour, bless 'em. Cats rule in my book, and let's face it, could they do any worse than us? You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.